Howdy folks, I'm Ben Starr, the ultimate food geek. Welcome to my messy kitchen. And before we start this video, if you notice a little bit of peeping and rustling over in the background, I've got 15 new baby chicks sitting in my living room a short distance from the microphone. So just consider that ambient, pleasant background noise. Now today, we are just a few days away from Thanksgiving, so I thought I would take a few moments to show you guys the easiest and best way to produce and execute your Thanksgiving turkey. Now, one of the most popular videos I've ever produced has been on brining your turkey, and it's true, 8-10 years ago, that's what I did. But I eventually got tired of that. It's a real hassle, it's real messy, dealing with all that salty liquid after the brining is finished is not necessarily the cleanest and easiest way to execute your Thanksgiving turkey. And I also discovered that while brining definitely does improve the juiciness of your turkey, it also dilutes the turkey's natural flavor. So for the last couple of years, I have migrated to the dry brining technique in combination with spatchcocking, which actually produces a much more superior Thanksgiving turkey. Now, the drawback to this method is that you're going to need to devote significant shelf space in your refrigerator for 3 days or so prior to the day that you roast the turkey. I know when you brine, you use a cooler, so it's kind of out of your fridge and saves you more fridge space. It's not a problem for me because I've got a fridge or two extra in my garage. But if you don't have an extra fridge, or you live in an apartment and don't have a lot of refrigerator space, before you even entertain this method, you're going to want to consider how you're going to execute all of your fridge space for your menu, because you're going to need a chunk of this, because this turkey is going to be sitting in that fridge for about 3 days. First things first, get your turkey unwrapped. Now today I'm working with a 9-pound turkey because this is just a sample video. The real thing's not going to happen for several days. Thanksgiving is still a week away. But the first thing that you want to do after you get your turkey off out of its wrapper is to remove all the stuff from the guts. Of course, this is a turkey neck, which you're going to use for your gravy, and it doesn't appear I've got anything else in here, so there were no giblets. Now, often you'll also see one of these metal or plastic sort of trussing devices. You don't want that. They don't work anyway, and we're not going to truss our turkey. We're spatchcocking it. So you want to go ahead and remove that as well and discard it. Now, for spatchcocking. If you've never done this before, don't be nervous. It's actually really laughably easy. You can practice on a chicken beforehand if you want to know the technique a little bit more comfortably, but it's actually not hard at all. So what you're going to want to do is turn the turkey upside down. Oh, look at that. We do have a little bag of giblets there. I'm going to save those for my gravy as well. So you're going to turn the turkey breast side down, and the goal of spatchcocking is to remove this central spine here. And to do that, you're just going to cut along each side of it. Now, you can use a really fancy pair of expensive poultry shears, which you can get for 15 or 20 bucks at any decent kitchen supply store. But I'm just going to use my regular kitchen shears, and if you've got enough force in your hands, these will work for you just fine. Even a regular pair of shears from your garage, as long as you clean and sterilize them. You're just going to put them in here just to the right of that turkey spine, which you can pretty easily see, and start to cut along those ribs. All right? Now, if you have weak hands, you can use both hands to cut through any particularly hard ribs or joints. And you just want to continue working your way up along the side of that spine, getting yourself a nice, clean cut. Not super hard. Okay, I've gotten all the way through this side. Now I'm going to repeat it on the other side. I'm showing this to you in real time so that you know it doesn't take a long time and it's not particularly complicated, but forgive me for not editing that out. All right, so now we've got our spine here, which you also want to save. Use that for some nice stock to make your gravy. Okay, so we've got the turkey carcass here. We're going to turn it back over, cavity side down. You'll notice some of these turkeys come with these awful cheap thermometers. Remove that. I know some of you are going to say, oh, that's going to leave a giant hole. All the juices are going to spill out of my turkey. Yeah, you'll lose some juices, but you're not going to notice it. This method produces really, really quality meat that holds that moisture in. So get rid of this thing. It's not accurate anyway. Now what you want to do is do a little CPR on the bird. So you're going to take it and push downwards to try to snap that breastbone. It requires a little bit of force, but that will help the turkey lay down a bit flatter than it normally would. All right, now, once you've done that, it's time to position the turkey. Set these guys aside here. Now, the turkey can still be nice and beautiful the way you would have a properly trussed turkey. You want to rotate the thighs and legs outwards so that the point here of the turkey leg is facing the breast meat. All right? It's going to lay out really nicely like that. Then you're going to take the wings, these big old tips, and just tuck them behind the body of the wing. And you're going to have a really lovely presentation just like that. Now it's time to dry brine. And dry brine really just means salting the turkey fairly heavily, but then letting it sit in the fridge. And all that salt penetrates into the cells of the turkey. It denatures the protein inside the cells, which turns it into a little matrix that kind of holds on to the turkey's moisture. So instead of losing that moisture as it cooks into the pan in the form of drippings, that moisture stays inside the turkey. So you're not adding as much extra liquid as you would in the brining process, but that extra liquid actually dilutes the flavor of the turkey itself. So this is going to give you a much more flavorful bird and still being really nice and moist at the same time. Dry brining is a fancy word for aggressively salting meat and then giving that salt time to penetrate completely through the muscle tissue, which for a big turkey can take 2 to 3 days. Now, if you're not the type of person that really enjoys precision, at this point you can just take your kosher salt and aggressively season the bird on both sides, rubbing that salt into every nook and cranny. Now, if you're a little bit afraid of your salt level, don't be. You're going to actually use more than you probably think. The rough rule of thumb is 1 teaspoon of kosher salt to every pound of bird. So if you're seasoning a 15-pound turkey, that's 15 teaspoons or 5 tablespoons of kosher salt. That's more than 1/4 of a cup. Most people will be like, that's way too much salt, but it's actually not by the time the salt is evenly distributed through the meat. So go ahead and have at it if you like just being kind of the cavalier sort of cook. But there is a more precise way for calculating the correct and exact amount of salt you need for your bird, but you need to get a final weight on your bird once you've spatchcocked it and removed all the giblets from the inside. So I'm just going to take a bowl here and zero out my scale, put my bird in to get a total weight. And it looks like my bird is 6 pounds and 15 ounces. So you can go to Google and type in 1% of 6 pounds and 15 ounces, and Google will tell you. Or if you happen to have like an Amazon or Google device in your kitchen, which I do specifically for cooking calculations, you can simply ask her, Alexa, what is 1% of 6 pounds and 15 ounces?
1% of 6 pounds and 15 ounces is 0 pounds and 1.11 ounces.
1.1 ounces is the amount of kosher salt that we're looking for to season this bird. So I'm going to measure out here 1.1 ounces. And so here I've got the exact amount of salt I'm going to need. The next step, if you want a truly superior bird, is to add baking powder to your salt before you begin to season it. I'm going to add about a tablespoon. The kind of rough ratio on here is 1 part baking powder to 3 or 4 parts salt. It's not that specific. So I'm just kind of eyeballing that, and I think 1 tablespoon is going to be good. Now, baking powder sounds a little bit weird to be putting on a chicken. We're not making muffins here. But there's actually a chemical reaction, or several chemical reactions that occur as a result of adding that baking powder to the chicken. The first is that it increases the pH, or raises the alkalinity level of the turkey's skin in particular. And a higher or a more alkaline meat pH results in darker and richer browning. And the crustier and browner you get the skin, the more appetizing, the more delicious it's going to be. The second chemical reaction that takes place when baking powder is heated is that it produces carbon dioxide. That's what causes your muffins to rise when you put baking powder in them. When that baking powder gets into the skin, though, and that heat hits the skin, it creates little bubbles of carbon dioxide that basically make that skin really, really airy, crisp, and delicious. So baking powder is a really easy way to up your game in terms of the skin. And this spatchcocking technique, when we finish cooking this turkey, it's all laid out here. The skin is facing that element on the oven, so you're going to get a lot of really delicious, beautiful, crispy skin. The baking powder is going to help you do that. So we're going to flip our turkey over here. I'm going to take about 1/3 of my salt. Don't go too heavy because you want to save enough for the other side. And give a nice kind of seasoning on the underside of the turkey. Don't neglect the bottom part of the drumsticks here. Give that a nice kind of pat and rub so that it sticks to your skin, doesn't fall off when you flip the turkey. Back over to the presentation side here. You'll see a little bit of extra skin here. You can easily cut that off if you want to make sure your turkey looks nice and pretty. Certainly not a requirement. And then we're going to get the rest of that salt and baking powder all over the turkey skin. Now, don't worry if some of your salt and baking powder falls into the pan. The salt is going to initially cause the turkey to lose some of its juice, which is going to flow out in the pan, but then that juice is eventually largely going to be reabsorbed by the bird. And that will carry the salt with it. All right, so now we have seasoned our turkey. It's spatchcocked. It's going to go into the fridge, minimum of 2 days, ideally 3. When I do this technique on a chicken, and I roast chickens almost once a week, I try to let the chicken sit in the fridge for 3 days. Not only does that allow the salt to reach an equilibrium state all throughout the tissues of the turkey, but it's also going to dehydrate the skin. And the drier the skin, the crispier it's going to get. This was always the problem with the wet brined birds, is that the skin became saturated with that liquid and it never really got beautifully crisp the way this baking powder and dry brining technique allows. Now, if you can get creative, that turkey does not have to take up the entire shelf of your fridge. You can shuffle things around, and as long as you can keep that tray relatively level, the turkey doesn't have to completely monopolize an entire shelf in your fridge. Now, this turkey needs to sit in here for a minimum of 2 days, but ideally 3, to allow time for that salt to penetrate all throughout the meat tissues and for that skin to get nice and dry so that it gets beautifully crisp. Tune in for the next installment where I will show you how to bake this glorious bird.